and welcome everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And I think we're going to start this week's episode with a little game I think that Joy has for me. Now, this sounds exciting. She has hinted to me what it's all about, but let's see how this goes.
So in the words of me and Tim, we are becoming a morning zoo. There was a morning zoo that I used to listen to, and they did this. They had rapper names, because there are some ridiculous rapper names. Now, these aren't Main Street artists. Like, I'm not going to ask Tim, like, how do you spell Nelly? Because he's going to at least have an idea of this. These are like these ridiculous rappers that are kind of up and coming. And they have to spell them. Now, some of them are spelled with dollar signs and Z's and things like that, or Z, if you're Tim, or my UK friends, they're spelled with Z. So I picked two that I thought were ridiculous, and one that reminds me of, like, England. Okay. You guys are going to be like, I'm stereotyping, but it's fine. So the first one. Now, I will try to do the best pronunciation, whatever that word is. I can't even say the words, so we're off to a good start, because you know how bad I am with words, Tim, sometimes. So I will try to hint to you what it may be. I will try to do my syllables and everything. So the first one, Tim, are you ready?
Yep.
Is leaky bands.
Leaky bands, like leaky as in a drain and bands as in wedding bands.
Yeah.
Leak1 bandz.
Close. So it's leaky like Leeky, and then you got bands. So you got like 50%.
Yeah, I was going like with the number one, because I thought, well, maybe it's going to be a little bit wacky, and maybe they named themselves because that was the Twitter account they could get which had a one in it. Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, that's a good. There's no other SoundCloud they can get. Sorry, that was a little stereotypy. But the leaky bands made me think of like a leaky cauldron, which then in turn made me think of the UK, like at Harry Potter. That was what I was saying, is a little stereotyping. But anyway,
it sounds like a brand of nappies.
That's a valid point. Yeah. All right, so
new from Pampers, leaky bands.
Wow, Tim. Anyway, yeah, if you're listening, Pampers, we'd love your sponsorship. You can cover the $18 I pay a month for the podcast. Anyway, so the next one is, now, I will say there are no numbers in this, Tim. No numbers. It's Lil Soda Boy.
What's the first word again?
Lil. Like little, but Lil.
Okay. LYL $ODA BOI.
Close. So close, Tim. You're getting it's LIL.
Got that, yes. Part one, got that.
Then it's soda. Wait, no, I thought you said LYL. Maybe you got it right then. Maybe I misheard. Because it's LIL, soda, and then boys with an I. So boy with an I. So you may have got it right. Maybe I misheard you.
Was there a dollar sign in there?
There was not. That's where I missed you. Okay, I thought you said LYL too. But yeah, little soda, and then it's boy with an I.
I was expecting it to be just like dollar signs and exclamation marks and numbers and forward slashes and all that kind of stuff.
See, I thought about that, but I was like, there are ones that are like that, but I was like, let me keep it a little, we'll just see how it goes. I mean, to be fair, they're both ridiculous. And sometimes the ones that I've heard on our radio zoo, like, it doesn't even sound like the words they're saying. I kept it kind of easy for you, Tim, but we'll step it up next time and add some dollar signs and some nutty number. But just so everybody knows, I have no clue who either of these rappers are, but the internet says Leaky Bands is a rapper from Lower East Side of New York, and Little Soda Boy, I can't even say it. It's a Seattle rapper who has a heavy auto-tune rasp. If you guys are listening, we'd love to have you. I don't know anything about you, but sure, send us an album. Me and Tim will review a song.
That would be, rap music is not my cup of tea at all, but I would objectively review it if somebody sent something in for me to listen to.
I mean, I did make Tim listen to TLC. And he was like, I don't know who Chili and Left Eye is, but I like this song.
Yeah, I liked Waterfalls. That was a pretty good song.
See, that's really the one everyone knows. But anyway, I just thought this would be fun. We'll do it for a few episodes and then we'll change the game up. Change it back to Ask Joey Anything or something. Who knows?
There we are. Well, next time, feel that you can up your game a little bit with characters that don't traditionally appear in names.
Tim was dead set on the $, everybody.
Oh, I've seen that where it has plenty. And you know who came up with that idea? That was the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase from WWF Wrestling.
All right, Tim, we'll give you one more rapper name. Let me see if I can find one that has a $sign in it. All right, let's see. There's so many. They're so ridiculous. Y'all, I'm Googling it on air. All right. Baby Tear.
Baby Tear, as in tears from your eyes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. BABI. And then TE @RZZ.
You overdid it, Tim. It was just Baby Tear, like the word with the $sign at the end. I was trying to give it to you. So I guess it's Baby Tears, really. But anyway, I tried to throw him a bone, everybody. He was dead set on the $sign up to that point when he needed it. All right. I like this game. This is a fun game.
Okay. Well, yeah, we will revisit this next time.
I feel like we're a series now, like a TV show, like Tim's introducing our next TV series. All right, Tim, what's next on our agenda?
Okay, so we have music news. So I'll start music news. So just a week ago was the Commonwealth Games. Are you familiar with what the Commonwealth Games are?
No, should I be?
It's like the Olympics, but it's just Commonwealth countries that participate.
Oh, okay. I do know what that is. I didn't know that. I've heard of that before. Okay.
Okay. So it was held in Birmingham in the UK, and they had the closing ceremony of the Commonwealth Games. And Ozzy Osbourne appeared with Tony Iommi, which are two members of Black Sabbath. Now, as we know, Black Sabbath played their very final gig a number of years ago because they decided that that was it. They were finishing. It was the end of the road and everything like that. But Tony Iommi was supposed to appear on this, but it was a big surprise performance that Ozzy Osbourne appeared.
Huh. Yeah, and he's not... I haven't heard about him performing a lot because his health's not great, is what I understood, but that could be just an assumption.
No, I think he has been suffering with some really bad health problems sort of later on in his life. And I think that probably was one of the reasons why they stopped touring with Black Sabbath.
Well, have you ever watched that? I've never watched the Osmond show, Tim, or Osmond, whatever. Osborne, not Osmond. We're not talking about Donny Osmond over here, everybody. Osborne is what I say. But have you ever watched the Osborne show? Like, I mean, the man's like flying off of like four-wheelers and like doing cartwheels down hills. I mean, he did a lot in his younger days. So, I mean, I imagine it takes a toll as you get older.
Absolutely. I mean, he lived a rock and roll lifestyle to the fullest when he was a much younger man. And, in later life, there have been some complications for him. But he released an album called Ordinary Man a number of years ago. I think there's a new album in the works which has Zakk Wylde on guitar. But to perform live with Tony Iommi was very special. I saw the video. He played Paranoid, and they played a very sort of trimmed down version of Iron Man. And I don't know, it's everything I wanted, really. I didn't have high hopes on the performance, but it was Ozzy. It sounded like Ozzy, and it sounded like every other recent version of Paranoid I've heard. Okay, Joy, I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect. So this is Mo Austin, who is actually a record executive. He has worked with Sinatra, Hendrix, Prince, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, The Kinks. He died at 95. This was on August 2nd, so we're a little bit behind, but I just saw it pop up, and I thought it was interesting. The music industry was playing, their tributes to him because he contributed to a lot of different artists. And he was a Russian immigrant in New York. And he started kind of in the jazz scene, and he worked with Frank Sinatra. That was his first own record label. And then it went from there. Under his leadership, the company became mainstream. This is Warner Brothers, by the way. I didn't say that. With artists like James Taylor, Fleetwood Mac, Frank Zappa, and the Sex Pistols. So, as you can imagine, he's very iconic in the music world, working with how many artists did I say, Tim, that shaped music as it is? And he recently passed away.
Well, I mean, he sounds like he had a long and fruitful life. And there's a lot of people like that in the music industry who work behind the scenes, and you don't necessarily know their name. Of course, you know the members of bands. You might even know who their manager is. You know, for being a geek like me, I might know who their guitar tech is or something like that. But there's like any other business, there's lots of people who you don't see behind the scenes that make the whole thing work.
And I just thought this is interesting because you don't hear it a lot. So apparently he worked with Warner up till 1993. So that's probably a pretty long span considering how old he was probably at that point. And Frank Sinatra's daughter, Nancy, said he was a true force in the music industry, but also a real sweetheart, which you don't hear a lot about record execs, right? You don't hear record execs or sweethearts. A lot of times you hear they were straight to the point and they knew what they wanted. You know what I mean, Tim? That's always kind of the narrative. So I just thought that was interesting.
Well, there we are. Well, as we say in the trade, rock in peace to you, sir.
There you go.
So I have one last story, and this is another rock and roll death, unfortunately. This is a Wrecking Crew guitarist who died today or yesterday, and that's a gentleman called Bill Pittman. And he
saw that one.
Yeah, he lived to the ripe old age of 102.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
we talked about the Wrecking Crew so many times, too.
Exactly. He used to use a Dan Electro 6-string bass, which is his primary instrument. He played on Be My Baby, he played on Pet Sounds. It was all over the sound. I think he played on Mr. Tambourine Man when he played ukulele. He played on Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. I mean, it's sometimes hard with these session guys to actually work out exactly what they played on. Apparently, he recorded on 425 separate recording sessions. And then out of that 425, I mean, back in those days, they were knocking that stuff out. So maybe a session might be an 8-hour session. He might record 2 complete albums in that.
It's so weird to me to think about now. Because now, Tim, and we've talked about this, for one album to come out, 74,000 people have to work on that album. Yeah. There's if you flip over, I'm sorry, guys, I'm not joking. Like, we were talking about the new Avril Lavigne album, remember, Tim? You flip it over, there'd be 400 names somehow. And maybe it's partially because if you don't give people credit nowadays, they'll come for you. I don't know how that works. But it feels like to get one album out, 74 people have to contribute now.
Oh, it's producers and songwriters and other producers. And we have 3 rappers on it. And it's just... It's
the one guy who did the countdown at the beginning.
I mean, there's that meme that goes around, isn't it? It's like Bohemian Rhapsody, 1 songwriter, 1 producer, and then it's like Little Nas X, 42 producers and 12 songwriters. And
I don't think me and Tim mean to insult anyone. It just seems to be the way it goes now.
Yeah, I don't know how all these people effectively collaborate.
It's like if you breathe near the sound booth, they're worried you're going to sue them, so they put your name on it.
Yeah, I do. I honestly, it's obviously working for a lot of people because, music's being made and it's popular and people like it. But there's somebody who's recorded in studio, someone who records their own music, has worked on albums. I don't see how you could have 6 or 7 different producers when you're trying to make an album.
Well, and here's where I'm going to get a little bit of my work life. So I'm an HR manager, and what Tim knows of me, I'm really good at producing systems that work. I'm a very systematic person who likes to put processes in place, right, Tim? I'm process oriented. If I have a process, I don't need 74 people involved. I will literally lose my mind. Yeah. I need the key people. I need you to give me what I need, and I want to keep moving. So I can't imagine having that many people working on one song. I'd lose my mind.
I mean, how would you even fit in the studio? I mean, I've recorded in commercial studios, and yes, there's normally a lounge, and there's an area behind the mixing board, and there's a live room. Where are these 6, 7 producers going to sit together with the engineer, together with the artists, together with hangers on? I mean, where are all those people going to go?
Do you think part of it's just who's bankrolling it?
I mean, maybe.
They're not physically there. They're just bankrolling it so they get their name on it.
I don't know. It just seems confusing to me.
Well, me and Tim sound like we're 100 and we don't understand modern day processes.
Well, we established I'm not 100 because we gave away our birth years a few episodes ago.
Everybody knows that was a fake birth year, Tim. I'm still trying to throw them off the track. They'll never know how old you are. Anyway, all right. Well, on to the episode.
Yes, indeed. So this week's episode, it's Joy's turn to pick the topic. And as ever, I don't know what she's picked out, but I do know she's excited about it. So over to you, Joy.
I'm sorry, Tim. I started to talk because I'm so excited. You know me. I don't know how to count to 5 before I speak sometimes when I get hyped. But everybody's going, yeah, I know. She talks over you, Tim. I'm sorry, Tim. Anyway, back to the point. So with that being said, it is now officially becoming spooky season. And by spooky season, I mean, it's still 90 degrees outside, but it's August. I'm going to take this as a fall. And it's been kind of cloudy, right, Tim, and rainy here these last few days.
It has indeed. Here in Southwest Virginia, it's been 60 degrees in the morning with a little bit of drizzle and some clouds. And I've been going on my morning walks. Well, my morning walk consists of walking across the road from where I work. There's a multi-story car park. I walk 6 flights of stairs to the top and then walk across the deck, walk down to the next deck, walk back, walk back. And it's 15 minutes, but I mean, no, you get back to the office first thing in the morning, and those stairs, they really get the blood pumping.
That's the way to get your heart rate. See, Tim used to know I used to do a mile on my lunch. I never once thought about the car park. That's smart because the steps are going to elevate the amount of calories. They're going to get that heart rate pumping. Tim, smart. All right, so back to spooky season. That means we're going to talk about crimes related to music. So this was actually a recommendation from a listener. The listener may be my twin sister, Brandy. Shout out to you. She also wanted to let Tim know that the vampire sound at the beginning of whatever episode that was gave her a heart attack.
I was doing my stellar Bill Compton from True Blood impersonation, of which I'm going to do again, but this time, Brandy, I'm not going to meddle with the audio levels. This is just standard. So if you're ready, here we go again.
All right.
I'm not human, Suki. I'm vampire.
There's a little bit of me laughing in the background. Brittany was like, what was that? And me, bless my heart, I always assumed I'm wrong because, I'm loud and I have a habit of talking over people. And for those who don't know, Tim knows this about me. I get excited and I don't think before I speak. It's not like I'm purposely trying to talk over anyone or anything like that. Tim doesn't, he's used to it. He's just like, Joy, be quiet for a second. So with that being said, I assumed when Brady said, oh my God, what is that loud noise? I thought it was me. And I was like, oh, is there an audio pop? Did I knock my microphone? And she was like, no. And she was like, oh, it's Tim's vampire impersonation. I laughed for 20 minutes straight.
Well, it's what's known in the trade, in the TV trade, and then in the audio podcast trade, it's what's known as a cold open. Where you post something before the episode starts without any context.
It was just funny because she she had her headphones in and she was working and she's just typing her little email and out of nowhere she went, like Tim's voice. And she said it dawned on her later what he was doing. But anyway, so vampire spooky season. But Brandy requested we speak about one specific crime related to music that she has a very big interest in. And then that spawned the whole topic. We're going to do a few episodes, a few different songs because obviously we can't talk about one song. So Tim, are you familiar with Charles Manson and the Beach Boys and that whole theory?
I'm familiar with, I think it's Charles Manson and the Beatles.
So there is a weird, so this was Brady's request. So there is a weird relationship between Charles Manson and the Beach Boys. Now, Helter Skelter and the Beatles will come in later, which I think is what you're probably thinking of. And then, he tried to have his music career or whatever. But there's a weird, I never heard of that. So when Brady brought it to my attention, I was like, That's interesting. So, I went on the Googs, gave it a Goog, and found out there is a weird connection to Charles Manson and the Beach Boys. So, we're going to go through the brief history of it, just discuss what it means, what it affects. I want to give a trigger warning now. I will not speak of any crimes. I will not put any, this is a PG podcast. We're just going to discuss, very lighthearted, surface level stuff. But it is about crime. So if that is a trigger for you, maybe skip this episode and come back later.
Okay.
I just want to put that at the beginning because, it is what it is. Me and Tim don't want you to feel bad halfway through the episode. We'd rather you shut it off now and do the next episode. Tim will talk about bars of soap or something. I don't know.
The night is young, episode. Joy. The night is young.
Anyway, so for those of my females, because it's always the females of the true crime buffs for some weird reason, this episode's for you. All right. So in the summer of 1968, a year before Charles Manson orchestrated, all of his craziness, he insinuated himself into a strange relationship with an unlikely source, the Beach Boys, which is weird to me because, I don't even know how they would connect. But anyway, I'm about to explain why, but it's weird to me. So Manson, who died in prison at 83, which I forgot he died, met the drummer Dennis Wilson after Wilson picked up and drove two female hitchhikers who happened to be living in Manson's cult. What? Known as his family. So Diana Luke, a member of the family who wasn't involved in some of the crazy murders, described in a recent memoir how Manson's ability to captivate Wilson, a famous musician, went on to validate more and more of Manson's stance. Now, this is just her saying. I want everybody to know this. I'm not here to say Dennis Wilson would try to convince Charles Manson of anything. She's obviously not mentally right if she's in the family, right, Tim? It's not a valid source.
Well, I think what happens is that people get tied up in these cults, and I don't think there's necessarily anything, really wrong with the people who get involved with that. But I think often they're lonely. Maybe they have some mental health problems, and they get sucked into these cults because they're offered, food, and they're offered a support system, and they're offered, something maybe they're lacking in their life. But of course, they get sucked into these things and it is bad.
So here's what I'm going to say. For those who don't know, Joy does hold a degree in psychology, and she's researched a little bit into this. We've talked about that before. One of the easiest, so I'm going to use an analogy that's probably going to make people want to punch me in the face for a minute, but just hear me out. It's not to insult one thing. So one of the processes sororities, fraternities, and the military do is that kind of break them down to build them up thing, right? You break them down to build them up into the team, the camaraderie, that thing that you want. So when these cults are seeking up people, because anybody can be brainwashed, Jim. Anyone, me, you, we say we can't, but there's a psychology behind it. They find you in a moment where you're vulnerable. So you're broken down, and then they bring you back up and they train you into that same kind of mental. There's a reason why that works in those situations. Those are just the first ones that come to mind. I mean, even jobs you've had may have done it, things like that. And so it's very easy, Tim, saying, you find somebody who just moved to California. They don't know anybody. They want to make it in the music scene. They don't know what's going on. And this Charles Manson guy's working with the Beatles for all they know, right? And so they're like, oh, he seems cool. But what I'm getting at is she's not a valid source to be telling the story, I would imagine. She's going to say it from the bias of Charles Manson, I would think, as one of his family members. Just throwing that out there. So anyway, Dennis and Charlie hit it off. Every time I say Charlie, I think of my husband, and they're not the same. Anyway, Dennis and Charlie hit it off right away, which is not surprising, given Charlie's skills at integrating himself with strangers. Dennis, in no rush to leave, hung out for a while, smoked some pot, of course, and listened to a bit of Charlie's songs. So basically, he found these hitchhikers, and they just happened to be part of Charles Manson's cult. According to Diane Luke, the same person, Wilson provided for the group and even drove them to see a doctor multiple times. He dropped acid with them, did some things we're not going to say because it's a PG podcast, but you guys can imagine. The Manson-Charles relationship, the Wilson-Manson relationship came to abrupt end as the summer of 1968 came to a close when Wilson took Manson, an aspiring musician, to record to his record studio. Manson had a disagreement with Wilson's producers and ended up pulling a knife on them. The family subsequently moved out of Wilson's house. Apparently, they were living in Wilson's house. I missed that part. But according to Blake, Manson and Wilson would occasionally still see each other before, obviously, they were arrested for their infamous murders. Infamous is the word.
Infamous.
It's not infamous, everyone. Words are hard. But have you heard of any of this?
No, I haven't. But I mean, none of that surprises me really. The question I have though is like he was picking up these hitchhikers. When did hitchhiking stop being a thing that people did? I was having this conversation with someone the other day. It seemed to be way back when hitchhiking was cool and everyone was just hitchhiking. But of course now you would not do that. I mean, if you was very down on your luck and you had to, you would. But for most normal people, you don't think, I'm just going to stand at the entrance to I-81 and just see if I can get to Florida.
But it was a thing in the 60s and the 70s. I feel like it died out in the 80s. Because if you hear stories of people going to music concerts or events or anything, it was just, soldiers getting home from Vietnam. I don't know if I feel like hitchhiking is an American thing. I don't know what it was universally, but in the 60s and 70s, hitchhiking was a valid thing. But now it's like, are you asking to get axe murdered? Like,
I know. I mean, certainly there was hitchhiking in England when I lived there. But I mean, much like how nobody really in their right mind is picking up hitchhikers these days, I think it's much the same there now.
Well, remember we told that story about Blondie with Ted Bundy in that one episode, Tim? She was almost kidnapped by Ted Bundy because she was hitchhiking home from a party, which means she was probably under the influence, which is a really bad time to be hitched. You know what I'm saying, Tim? Mm-hmm. Like your inhibitions are low. You may have been drinking at a party. It's late at night. Like she really set herself up there. I don't know, Tim. I could tell you right now, I wouldn't want to pick up a hitchhiker either. On the flip side, they're just going to turn around and hit me over the head while I'm driving down the road.
Yeah, that's the thing. For everyone involved, it's not a good idea to get involved. But however, thinking about that, as dodgy as being a hitchhiker or picking up a hitchhiker is, think of Uber and Lyft. I mean, I know there's a money transaction involved, but it's not like a registered cab company. It's somebody with their car picking up randoms. Mm-hmm. Really, if you break it down, take the app and the money out of it, that's what it is. So as dodgy as hitchhikers are, what's the difference?
Well, and as someone whose husband did a lot of gig work, Tim knows this. My husband does all kinds of things. He'll go do Instacarts. He'll do DoorDashes. He'll do Ubers. He'll do Lyfts. And Tim and I live in a very lucrative area for that because we're between two major universities. So if he wants to make a little extra money for me to pay off my student loan debt or whatever, that's a great way to make some extra cash. And Charlie is one of those people who would do that. But I've thought about it too. It's terrifying. To be fair, he said most of his Uber and Lyfts were just drunk college kids. But he talked about one night he had so he drives a Prius, which is perfect for gig work because you don't have to pay that much in gas. And he had he has the 3 back seats, but it's a pretty narrow back seat. I drive a very big SUV. He does not. Then you have the passenger seat. One time he went to pick up some college kids, and there was probably 6 of them, and they were drunk. They all tried to pull into his Prius, and he was like, absolutely not. First of all, there's not enough seats for you guys. Second of all, we're going to get pulled over. It's just not feasible. He remembers he got in kind of a verbal obligation with the guy because the guy wanted to be like, it's no big deal. We're going 2 feet down the road. And he goes, no. And I think 3 of them ended up getting up and 4 of them waited for the next Uber. But I thought about that in that moment. It's a terrifying thing. I'm glad he doesn't do it as much anymore because it is a little bit scary. And he talks about a lot of times it was always in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. But on the flip side, I've taken many Ubers home. So maybe I'm judging the hitchhikers too much.
I don't know. I've got in an Uber the sum total of once.
I have. So when I've been bar hopping before, I've done it, or when I'm come back from a concert and there's no good place to park. And I will say, me and my friend, we have what's known as, Charlie explained it to me later, where he used to work. And thankfully, I caught the guy in the middle of it, but she ended up with an additional $60 charge because we were coming back from the Backstreet Boys concert. And they're always supposed to follow the route that Uber gives them. They're not supposed to deviate from it. It's a safety thing. It's to make sure they're not trying to take an extra route to cost more. He tried to say that the Uber, he couldn't go that route. His phone wasn't working and all this stuff. And we had to throw a fit, and she ended up with an extra $60 charge we had to fight the next day. That was a whole thing. But anyway, not to insult you if you're an Uber or Lyft driver, me and Tim just don't want you to get axe murdered.
Absolutely.
That's really what we're saying. And kind of, I really don't want to get axe murdered either. It's not on my list of things to do.
And besides, Joe, the world of broadcasting doesn't need you.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, to be fair, poor Tim's like, Joy, I need you in a bubble because for those who don't know, I have a broken foot now and a sprained ankle.
Yeah, Joe, these injuries. I mean, you don't have to get these injuries just for podcast content. You know, we can talk about carpet fitting or something.
To be fair, this was the stupidest injury, y'all. There's nothing funny about it. It wasn't even a good injury. It's not like a car ran into me or I did anything cool. I walked out to the driveway. Me and Charlie were going to go pick up lunch, and there's a bag on the back seat. He said, hey, throw that in the bag. It's a big pizza bag from what he was doing, his door dashing. So I was like, okay. And I went to throw it in the back, and I kind of like, you know, when you're like in a hurry because you're getting ready to take off and you're ready to throw something in the house. I did that exact thing, but I came around, and there's a little bit of a dip in my driveway. Need to get my driveway fixed. And when I did, the foot went underneath me, and I went straight down on it. I will say I worked the entire workday and tried to put it off until the next day. But about 9 p.m. that night, I ended up in velocity care going, well, maybe because there was a giant knot on the side of my foot. But then they didn't even see the break originally. And later I found out I had a break. So moral of the story is, everybody, when you don't be in such a hurry, because that's when you injure yourself. Yeah, I was in too much of a hurry.
Then wasn't you stung with a bee? Wasn't that? Didn't you have a bee sting?
When I came home, so when I went back to the doctor, this is the funny part of it. Tim's right. You guys need to hear this. So I went to the doctor, and the second time I went is when they finally decided, yes, it's broken. He did a lot of poking, sent me for the MRI, and said, yes, it is actually broken. I have what's known as an occult fracture, so it doesn't show up. Occult, which is funny because we're talking, but anyway. So it doesn't show up on the X-ray. It shows up later when you do an MRI. And I was like walking in my house, and I'm like, I'm going to have to go back. It's going to be a whole thing. I got to go to ortho. I got to do physical therapy. Like, you know, it went from just a sprain to you got to deal with this. And then I'm walking in my house. I got stung by a bee right on the back of my knee. I was like, really? You couldn't have waited till later, bee. I'm already in a bad place. Story of my life. All right. Less about me, more about music. So the rest of the podcast, because that was a very specific topic Brady wanted to speak of, and it's kind of hard to find really similar things to that. So we're really just going to talk about songs that inspired true crime, or supposedly inspired true crime. But I told Brady we would discuss the Charles Manson Beach Boys thing, and I thought it was cool because I have never heard of it.
Me neither. I'd never heard of that.
Have you heard of a Metallica fan who killed his mother based off of a Metallica song?
No, but I don't think Metallica directly have been accused of what they call backward masking, where supposedly if you play music backwards, it has satanic messages in it. But it wouldn't surprise me.
So basically what it says is in 2002, a 28-year-old man named Ronald Pitch, I don't know how to say his last name, from New Jersey, picked up a dumbbell, and we're not going to go into details, but let's just say he hurt his mother because she refused to buy him cigarettes. What a way to go. So we're going to go on to it. There was also his niece there, and bad things happened. But anyway, so without motive, Pitch pulled up from the... Hold on, I'm going to go ahead because I don't want to read into that. So he was paranoid and schizophrenia and suffers from a manic depressive, said his lawyer. He claimed that he saw demons in the face of ordinary people and that the Metallica song Ronnie helped push him over the edge. Are you familiar with that song, Tim?
Yes, I am. It's off Load or Reload. I think it's Load it's on. To me, that sounds like someone who really should have been getting some really good help and hadn't got some really good help. And the Metallica song is just I don't say it's not an excuse, but it's just maybe the final catalyst that pushed that poor chap over the edge, and the lady that is no longer with us.
Yeah, and there's some other family member stuff I'm not going to go into. I mean, because that song talks about the streets are red, I'm afraid, or something like that. That's the song lyric. But like, I don't really particularly think, well, it does say the bloody day, but that's not to say that should end up. But I understand. But I just found it interesting that that's what he said. You know what it is, though, Tim? It's probably just an association. That's the last song he remembers or something right before it happened. I think that's probably what it is.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, It's, as I said, it's not one of the songs that's often accused of having some kind of satanic message in it. I like that song "Ronnie" by Metallica.
I do too. It's a song that sticks out to me because it's not like it's a popular song, but it's not like one of their major songs, right? So I just thought it was interesting that was the one he came up with. But you're right; it's somebody who needed help, and that's probably the last song he associates or something.
Exactly.
But yeah, so apparently that happened in 2008. Now this is the one me and Tim are very familiar with. The Beatles inspired Charles Manson.
Yes, this is something that I think we may have discussed before. And I know for many years, Paul McCartney would not play Helter Skelter in concert because of the association with Charles Manson. Mm-hmm. And I think, many years after the fact, he thought, well, hang on a minute, it's my song. I'm not having that guy ruining my song. I love this song. I wrote this song. So I'm just going to play it.
But I feel like maybe I'm wrong or maybe I'm seeing. So those who don't know, Helter Skelter is the song. It's so basically he fixated on the White Album, but specifically Helter Skelter, right? Like that was his thing. And he said it was about a race war. There's going to be a race war. So those who don't know, I'm just going to go through all the pieces because I don't think we've explained it thoroughly, but that's kind of the basics of it. On August 8th, which is weird because that wasn't that long. Well, we're in August now. But in 1969, basically Charles Manson sent 4 of his brainwashed followers to break into the home director of Roman Polanski. He was out of town, but they brutally murdered everybody who was inside, including Sharon Tate, who was pregnant. Manson believed the murder would bring on a prophecy of a race war with the Black Panthers. So that's where the whole Helter Skelter comes in. He obsessed with the White Album and blamed them for what it's done. It's the Beatles. That's the music they're putting out. His words. He said to the district attorney who convicted him of the heinous crimes, these kids listen to this music and they pick up on messages. It's subliminal. Manson fixated on one track, particular Helter Skelter. He named it as the race war accelerant and movement after the song, according to Vox, a Florida federal prosecutor. So more clear lines like the "all you need is love" were ignored by Manson, of course. And he cynically used to manipulate his flock with the more negative things. And there's a movie called Helter Skelter that goes a lot into detail. It's a documentary, actually. Let me restate this, that I watched pretty extensively where he goes into detail about why he thought this. But for some reason, that song and that album he says that it was manipulating the world, which is ironic to him because he was using it to manipulate the world.
Yeah. The funny thing about the song Helter Skelter, it was a response to The Who because at the time The Who was seen as a rock band, and for some people saw the Beatles as a pop band, and then they were such fabulous musicians and all that, but they didn't rock hard like The Who did. So they put out Helter Skelter just to show that they could rock just as hard as The Who.
So what's funny about that, Tim, is the words Helter Skelter, apparently, Paul McCartney has clarified it's actually about playground equipment.
Yeah, it probably is.
And it's divine of any meaning. It's just a random thing. Which we've talked about. The Beatles did that. Some of their songs had zero meaning, and everybody put meaning to them or context to them, which I was always taught as an artist. You never try to figure out what the artist meant. You take the song and make it about what you want it to, but maybe that's not a good thing with what Charles Manson was doing.
Yeah, and some artists do like to explain the genesis of the lyrics that they write and what they're trying to get across, and then you can interpret it any way you wish to as well. But as you said, some lyrics are just nonsense.
Yeah. He literally said, and I don't know all the details, but he said it's just about playground equipment. He was sitting there trying to write something looking at a playground, and that's where Helter Skelter came to be.
Helter Skelter it was.
But to be fair, that is one of the more famous ones that I think everybody's kind of heard of at this point. So the next one it's AC/DC, which I'm sure Tim has heard of before, maybe.
I may have known about AC/DC. Maybe I saw AC/DC at Wembley Arena, and I think it was maybe 2001, 2002. And it was the loudest thing I've ever experienced in my life. This is before I got into wearing earplugs, like on stage and wearing earplugs to concerts. We was right at the front of the catwalk, in front of where Angus was strutting his stuff.
As he
And
does.
the amount of decibels coming off that thing was absurd. Like when Angus's guitar tech came out, he sound checked his guitar rig, and you could feel the sound pressure just from the back line without the PA being switched on. It was absurd. And then at the very end, when they closed with For Those About to Rock, they brought the cannons out. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I walked out of that place, one of my ears completely shut down, and the other ear was just whining with the whistle. And it was like that for days and days. And I mean, I suffer from tinnitus now, which is like a low level, like whistle all the time. And if I'm tired, it gets worse. Or if I don't put earplugs in and I play like a sound check, it will be bad for a few days. But that level of ringing in my ears and the fact that I've suffered temporary hearing shift in one ear, that is the loudest sound I've ever experienced.
I can imagine, because that's kind of like their thing, honestly. I have all the bands I could think of that would be extremely loud. I think AC/DC ranks up there.
Well, I will tell you who holds the loudest concert on record. It's The Who. It's at Charlton Athletic Football Ground. I think it was in the late 70s, and I forget how many decibels it was, but it's still on record the loudest concert that ever happened ever.
I will say the last two concerts I've went to, I've wore earplugs.
Yeah, I find if you go to a concert and you wear like CVS brand or Boots brand foam earplugs, for most people they're okay, but they take all the treble out, so they sound very muffled. So you don't get the same quality of sound. But I have my musician's earplugs, which are 15 dB attenuation at the eardrum. And I've had molds done in the hearing aid shop where they take molds from your ears to create the plugs. And I've got 3 or 4 sets of them. Smart. And you put them in a concert situation and it sounds great. All of that nastiness, all of that distortion, all of that over-the-top sound pressure just goes, and all you get is a very comfortable concert experience.
Well, there you go. Tim's not being sponsored by that, but if you guys want to do it, by all means. All right. So back to AC/DC. This is called The Night Stalker was the name of this person, and he loved AC/DC. So basically, this guy was Richard Ramez. He terrorized the Los Angeles area for 2 years in the 1980s, taking as many as 16 lives, sadly. The most frightening thing about him was he was indiscriminate. He just broke into houses at random. There was no way for them to figure out who he was because there was no like a serial killer, you hear about patterns, right, Tim? Mm-hmm. There was no pattern. He just wasn't picky. He just did what he wanted. So anyway, that made it very hard for people to figure out who he was or what he was doing. But apparently he had a love for AC/DC's album Highway to Hell and the song Night Prowler, which is where they got his name.
Okay.
And sadly, his favorite lyrics were, "What was that noise outside your window or a shadow on your blind?" Well, too on brand, right, Tim?
Absolutely. I mean, that AC/DC's Highway to Hell is an absolutely fantastic album. And it's probably one. I like Power Age as well, but certainly from the Bon Scott era, Highway to Hell is an absolute highlight. Like I said, I'm torn. Highway to Hell or Power Age. They're both great. But of that Bon era, Highway to Hell probably has more of the quote unquote hits on it. So
for those who don't know, and my mother, who listens to this podcast, can come to my defense, it's very weird because I am an AC/DC fan, but I'm not a super large AC/DC fan anymore. But one of the first musicians that I ever owned, and I probably will say this, every album they ever produced was AC/DC. I got an obsession with them as a child. I can name to you, Power Age has Next to the Moon, Down Payment Blues, Up to My Neck, Sin City. I was obsessed with AC/DC for a short amount of time. I don't know why. I got stuck on, I just started buying the albums. I mean, Shoot to Thrill, Pay to Kill. It's one of my favorite things. Too Many Women. But anyway, sorry guys. Anyway.
So have you ever seen AC/DC?
I have not. I would kill to. Sadly, I can't see original members, but anyway, they've changed singers on me. But I would love to. And if someone wants to buy me tickets as a thank you for Christmas, by all means, Tim. But I was obsessed with their first. I mean, that I was obsessed for a very long time. It's very interesting to me because I'm not a big fan of that kind of music, like long term. Like it wasn't like the kind of thing. But I mean, Let There Be Rock. If you want blood, you got it. Power Age. They were my thing.
Well, there we are. Well, the thing is, if you was to see AC/DC now, it's not really AC/DC.
That's what I said. I can't see the originals.
Well, we lost Malcolm Young, and Malcolm Young is the heart. Well, was the heart of the band. I mean, everyone thinks of Angus at the front, strutting around in a school.
Brian Johnson,
with his Gibson SG. But Malcolm Young, he's the powerhouse. He's holding that whole thing together. He's playing that rhythm guitar. He's writing all the songs. I mean, like he'd just be there doing it. And when we lost him, and his nephew Stevie Young took over, yes, it probably sounds much the same, but the heart of the band had left.
Well, and I was a big Bon Scott fan. I mean, he died in 1980, so it's not like I've really got, but I like that era. And then, I would love to see Malcolm Young up there in his Angus Young up there in his little schoolboy outfit. Like, that is iconic in and of itself, but you're right. It'd be hard now for me to go see them. And I remember as a kid, I always assumed, I'm like, they seem pretty American. And then one day somebody was like, they're from Australia. And I was like, what? Where did that come from? I don't know why that took me off. And, Phil Rudd, you've got Mark Evans, but, and then Evans was fired, replaced by Cliff or whatever his name was. But yes, true story. For those who don't know, Joy had a slight obsession with AC/DC for about 10 years.
Well, I'm impressed that you like the Akadaka.
I do. I mean, but I will say, if I have to pick
AC/DC or Glee, which way would you go?
That's a hard one. I was thinking if I have to pick album, as for those about to rock, we salute you.
You see, I'm torn whether you go, because it's two distinct eras. I mean, how could you not like every track on Back in Black? I mean, it's impossible not to like every track on Back in Black.
It's true.
But then you go into the Bon era, and then, like I say, you're torn. Is it Power Age? Is it Highway to Hell? I mean, it's
hard. Of course, no. Actually, I take everything I said back. It's Razor's Edge.
That is good.
I'm a Razor's Edge girl.
Yeah,
I'm just going to say Thunderstruck and Money Talks. Can't be beat.
So, I mean, Thunderstruck is amazing. There's a video, I forget where it is. I think it's somewhere in South America. And I think they open with Thunderstruck. And because he's playing that riff at the beginning, and when the drums come in, everyone in this stadium is jumping up and down, and the camera tower is shaking.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, I would lose my mind. But I will say Money Talks, Tim. That's a big one for me, too. Because, I mean, I can't, the way he says listen to the money talk, it just pierces my brain.
But then you go back to Bon.
I
and
know.
Then you think about A Long Way to the Top if you want to rock and roll. Which is a rock and roll handbook. I mean, that's everything you need to know about playing in a band is in that song. I
feel like we could go about this for days. It really is, because I said that, and now I'm sitting there going, but am I serious? Is it really? Because I will say, though, that Razor's Edge, if I have to pick one that was probably my favorite one that I put on the most, it's that AC/DC Silver with the red in the middle with the Razor's Edge coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, I love Thunderstruck and Money Talks, and, Razor's Edge is also on it. But that was one of their later albums. So, I don't know. We'll be here all week. Back to the topic at hand.
What was your topic, Joy? I mean, was this an AC/DC episode? I don't know.
That might be a future topic. But anyway, so apparently this man, but once again, I will say, name me a song called The Night Prowler. It is a little on the nose here.
Exactly. But being AC/DC, the lyrics are typically very simplistic. And
That's
if it's
true.
a night prowler, it's probably a lady of the night or somebody who they've been with or something.
You mean to tell me Dirty Deeds isn't that deep, Tim?
No, but they're done dirt cheap.
Somebody out there's like, oh, he had to make the pun, didn't he? God, that'll be in my head for the next 6 years. Anyway, so back to now everybody knows me. Oh, here's another band you may have heard of, Tim. It is a one Guns N' Roses.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a guy once named Axel. I don't know. I could be off on that.
What? But you mean Bill Bailey? Him?
Yeah, that's the one I mean. Yeah. Anyway, so apparently a Guns N' Roses song, I'll name the song in a second, was linked to 3 deaths. 3.
Ooh.
All right. So in 2002, A man named Justin Barber. When I first read this, when I was researching, I read that as Justin Bieber. I thought this could be a very different episode.
Oh, goodness me.
Was found shot 4 times because he was the dead one, but alive and slumped over in his wheelchair. Oh, no, on the wheel of his car on a close to hallway in northern Florida. Justin's spouse, April Barber, was later found dead on a nearby beach. Justin told police he'd been attacked, a robbery gone wrong, but couldn't remember the assailants. And a shocking twist, forensic evidence showed Justin shot himself and his wife. He was heavily in debt and stood to gain millions from insurance of his spouse. A search of his computer also turned up key pieces of evidence. The prosecutor basically said Justin had researched how to survive a gunshot wound. Don't do that on your own PC, Tim, if you're going to shoot yourself. There's my first problem.
I mean, I don't condone that 100%. I'm not condoning that. However, private browsing mode is like in the top. You go that private browsing, and then
incognito.
It doesn't. Yeah, and it doesn't store anything on your machine.
So usually people who murder aren't that smart is what we're getting at. Anyway, on that day, that's actually not true. There's some of them who were really smart, but this guy wasn't. On that day, he downloaded a Guns N' Roses track, Tim. It is a one, Used to Love Her. The song contains a refrain, I used to love her, but I had to kill her.
Yes, I'm familiar with that song. That is off GNR Lies, which was like an EP that was released. Well, it depends. Some markets it was released after Appetite for Destruction. Some other markets it was released before. So around the same time.
Yeah, so apparently they used that track. So they brought the contents of his computer and his evidence, and they actually played that song for the jury.
Oh, wow.
That's damning evidence against. Oh, I said a bad word. Whatever. That's not what I said. Evidence against him. But anyway, and he was convicted and found guilty. So later in 2012. Another Guns N' Roses fan also took the life of his partner. Thomas Michael William had been arguing with his living girlfriend about his sprinkler business. I don't know why, but what could you be arguing about a sprinkler business for, Tim? It's just water. What could be?
Yeah, but like any business, you got bills to pay. You got people who don't turn up. You've got I don't know misappropriation of assets. I mean. The business is irrelevant.
Funny to me. It's just funny to me that it was a sprinkler business. Like, how many things could go wrong in your sprinkler business? I'm sorry, everybody.
What happens if you don't pay your water bill? I mean, then your sprinkler business is you're done.
We shouldn't be laughing, but for some reason, that's really funny to me. All right. So it was apparently badly underwater. That's what they said. Underwater, Tim. Underwater.
See, there we are.
Whatever. All right. So one night when him was drunk, of course he was, and was repeatedly listening to the lyrics. I used to love her, but I had to kill her. And then apparently an argument broke out and he shot and killed her that night.
That's terrible. And do you know the worst thing about this? Is that like if you're a musician and you've written a song, and you might have written that song in jest.
Yep.
It's just a funny throwaway song with ridiculous lyrics. And you write this song and then you put it out there to the world and then people killing each other over it. I mean, I don't know. That would, I don't know, mess me up in some way, I think.
At the same time, you kind of have to disassociate yourself, like you were saying with the first one. It sounds like someone who's not there and they would have found anything that would have led them. You know what I mean, Tim?
Sure,
it's
absolutely.
Hard to tell.
It's folks out there that need help, they're not getting help, and then it's coming to this.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrible. It's a very blunt lyric, too, I think. But I mean, there's other songs that say the same thing in different words. So it's hard to tell. But yeah, apparently that one where he tried to kill himself, the other one killed his wife, and then he did that. So 3 different ones associated with the song from Guns N' Roses. Sorry, everybody. But so the next one is a band that I don't think Tim is going to know, or an artist I think Tim is going to know, because I don't know who they are. Chief Keef, Keef. I don't know who that is.
Keef.
Well, is it Keef like like Keith, like from smoking. I don't know, whatever this guy's name is. So that guy, I'm guessing he's a rapper. Tim, how do you spell it?
Chief Keef.
There you go. Yep. How do you spell it? Let's see if Tim can spell this one.
CHEICHE1FK33F. Maybe.
Yeah, there's no numbers. It's just spelled exactly like you think it is.
I mean, these rappers need to up their game. There needs to be numbers in there.
This is horrible. So apparently this guy, this rapper, it says teens allegedly killed and copied him. The guy is quoted as saying, "We were bored, didn't have anything to do, and we decided to kill someone."
That's terrible.
I've been pretty bored before, Tim, but that's not what's happened in my mind.
No, when I'm bored, I pick a guitar up or watch Smokey and the Bandit for the 58,000th time.
Well, as someone who's not allowed to put any weight on their foot, I've been very bored for the past 3 weeks, and usually that consists of me playing Animal Crossing and working on my ukulele.
Well, there we are. See, it's not like you can go out to a local Victorian fort or folly or anything.
Not really, no. But anyway, so he said that was his entire explanation on the court in 2013 for killing a man. That was what they said. Edwards and his friend, Chance Looney, were charged with first-degree murder after they snuck up on a baseball player from Australia who was out for a jog in Oklahoma and shot him in the back. They stated motive is truly mystifying. Edwards said to the police for fun. Some reporters also zeroed on Ed's Twitter feed, suggesting he was planning this. However, many violent posts were not original musings, but rather lyrics from another teen who favors homicidal homies, the Chicago-based rapper, Mr. Keith, or whatever we decided his name was. For his real name is Kenneth Cozart. Cozart is known for his own legal struggles and his drill music aesthetic infused with voyeuristic tales of violence. See, I have so many things wrong with this because, I mean, it is music. We should be free to express ourselves. We should be free to deal with what we're dealing, but you also need to be cognitive of what you're putting out to the world. Right?
Yeah, true. And exactly like I said with the Guns N' Roses song, it's like you release this thing out into the world and you don't know how someone's going to interpret that and act upon that.
And this guy, apparently, he's very blunt in his music and a desire to kill people indiscriminately, like randomly. And this person shared all of his leaks and, song lyrics on Twitter. Now, do I think... Okay, so here's where I get a little weird about that. People talk about are video games causing violence? I don't think so. I'm a big proponent of, correlation doesn't equal causation. That's the way science looks at it. Mm-hmm. But being constantly fed a certain message, I think, can affect a brain that's maybe not in good shape.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And as I said, I think all of these stories so far, if people have sought help, we wouldn't be discussing this stuff.
Exactly. So this is one Tim has also heard of. It is Pearl Jam.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably already know what song it is. It's Jeremy. Of course it is.
Of course.
So apparently it really came to life. So Pearl Jam's Jeremy is one of Seattle fans' most iconic tracks. I think it's probably the one I've heard the most of them, period. The song is based on a true story of Jeremy Wade Dell, who in 1991 brought a large caliber handgun to school and, in a horrifying act, shot himself in front of his teachers and his classmates. So this song was on heavy rotation, apparently, in 1992 on MTV. I was 2 years old, so I cannot confirm or deny, but apparently it was a very popular song at the time. It's because that was during the height of the grunge kind of, I'd say, Pearl Jam meets Nirvana thing, right? 1992?
Yeah, I mean, that's around the time we had satellite TV for the first time, and we had MTV Europe. And even on MTV Europe, Jeremy was played about every 7 songs or something like that.
So Pearl Jam even released an uncut version in 2020. The version that aired in 1992, however, had the tragic but clarifying image with the gun in Jeremy's mouth, which, if you've never seen it, is a little terrifying. I've seen that clip before. Wasn't a fan. So anyway, the idea teenager Barry Cottis allegedly took away from this in 1996 when he walked into his classroom with a rifle and opened fire on his classmates, according to the Rolling Stone. He shot and killed 3. His attorneys argued that the video Jeremy was the influence for the shooting. Which I will say, Tim, it's a dark song.
It is. It's a dark song sort of wrapped up in a rememberable chorus type thing.
Well, and the other one that I Don't Like Mondays is a horrible, like it's based off of that girl who like literally shot up a school, and when they asked her why she was doing it, she said, "I don't like Mondays."
Yeah, absolutely. That is what that song is about.
And she was like, she opened fire on in America right now, obviously this is a sensitive topic, but she opened fire on school kids. But yeah. I mean, it's one that I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this because it is something I feel like we have to talk about it. And people have emotions and thoughts and feelings and what prompted these people to get to where they're at. But on the flip side, I don't know that I'd want to. I don't know from Pearl Jam's perspective if I'd want to put that song out there. Like, that's just me. I don't think I could bring myself to do it.
Yeah, but it was something that was very important to Pearl Jam to get it out there and to discuss that.
And that's I mean, and it's a beautiful song.
Yeah, it also has a 12-string bass on it.
I know something like that was going to come up. Tim's like, just so you know, I'm not a. Are you a pretty big Pearl Jam fan? Because I have to be honest, I'm not. They're not my real cup of tea.
I love 10. 10 is absolutely amazing from top to bottom. 10 is the best, and then Versus is pretty good, and then everything else in Pearl Jam is fine. If I heard that song, I would probably like it, but doesn't connect with me to the same way that 10 does. It's like 10 is their Sgt. Pepper's, if you like. Every track on it has Black on there and Alive and a Porch and all the great songs are on 10. I mean, someone like Ian Husbands, who is a Pearl Jam super fan, he loves Pearl Jam. I was thinking about. And he would be able to tell you the ins and outs of every single album across the catalog. But for me, it's 10, a little bit of Verses, and the rest of it it's okay.
So one Ian Husbands who I was thinking about, because me and him one night were discussing this. There's a subculture of people who are super fans of Pearl Jam. And I think that for what you were saying, I agree. It was a very important moment for them to get out to the world. But it's just interesting how I personally don't know if I could have put that out there, but it is interesting to see how it's interpreted. But I mean, there's literally, I don't know, maybe I'm in the camp of I just can't give people that much credit, but I can't imagine one song influencing you enough to do this, Tim. I just can't.
Well, it depends what headspace you're in, I suppose. I mean, if you're at that edge and all it takes is to listen to that, and then that's what pushes you. I mean, I don't know.
But I don't think that's the song's fault. I think that's society failing you's fault.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know.
Me and Tim are not psychologists. No. We do not know the answer. All right. So this episode's gotten pretty dark, y'all, but it's spooky season. We don't do this often. So here's another band I think Tim is probably more familiar with than I am. I'm just going to be honest with you. A1 Megadeth. Have you heard of them before?
I have indeed. Dave Mustaine, who is the singer, songwriter, guitar player in Megadeth. Recently, the bass player Dave Ellefson was fired because he was having an inappropriate relationship with a younger person via like Zoom or something.
So basically, it's another thing of a campus shooter. So what he was saying was this Kilver Gill is not American. Kimber, it's Kimbeer, and then it's Gill, claimed in his epitaph that he lived fast and died young. There we go. Live fast, die young, Tim, apparently. He was living with his parents of Montreal, spending his free time posting on the now defunct golf message board, vampirefreaks.com, which I didn't know was a thing. He had some weird fantasy things about trench coats and blah, blah, blah. On the morning of September 13, 2006, Gill wrote online he'd been drinking whiskey and signed off. He drove to Dawson Junior College, which I'm thinking is I think it's all in Canada. Stepped out of his car in a trench coat, military boots, and opened fire. He shot 20 students and killed one. Then he turned the gun on himself. Basically, what he was saying was Among the killer's final blog entries was a reference of the Megadeth and the band's French love song, A Toute la Mode. Jill's post had been removed, but he wrote that the song convinced him to commit the heinous crime. Megadeth's frontman, Dan, so he got somebody who Dave actually said and called the killer not worthy of being a Megadeth fan. And defending the I was so angry with this guy, he would use my song and they would try and turn a beautiful song into something ugly and nasty. So there's somebody who spoke out about what you were saying as a musician, and someone takes your song and uses it in that way. Because, like, A Toute la Mode, it's a love song in a way.
Sure. But again, I mean, that is a heinous act. It's a terrible, terrible act. But you don't know what that person's thinking at that time, and it could have just been the last thing they was listening to.
I do like that he stood out and said, no, I'm not letting you do this. And that would be hard because if you put out a song you thought was a masterpiece, that's beautiful to you, sentimental, and then something like this happens, and now when people Google your song, this is what pops up.
Exactly.
Which, all right, we got one more, Tim. This has been a dark episode.
It has been dark. I mean, normally you and I are like waxing lyrical about all kinds of nonsense. This has got quite dark all of a sudden.
Maybe we'll hold this one to closer to Halloween, Tim.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean, by the time this one comes out, it'll actually be closer to Halloween.
There we are. We'll be fine. Ladies and gentlemen, don't worry.
Well, you guys don't realize this, but me and Tim are recording this in August, but by the time it comes out, it'll be October. This will be our Halloween special. All right. So we will give it, let me see. I'm going to pick one that I think maybe is not as dark. None of these were really that funny because there's nothing funny about any of this. But with that being said, we'll go with U2. Good old Bono's Exit. Have you ever heard the song Exit, Tim?
Which album is it from?
Good question, because I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with it. Exit. I'm not a big YouTube person. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's Exit / Gloria, U2, the Joshua Tree.
Oh, okay. So it's what you would call classic era U2, because a lot of like early U2 had a very similar kind of sound. And then they got to Actung Baby. And when they brought Actung Baby out, it says, with this album, we are burning down the Joshua Tree. That was Bono's quote.
So there we go. So in the late 80s, Rebecca Stafford, a 21-year-old Scarlett, coming off of a major network breakout run in the CBS's My Sister Sam, which I've heard of that. The show was canceled in 1988, but the work kept coming, and Schaefer quickly became a favorite of 17, like the magazine, like she was like a popular teen, whatever. The ingenuous ride came to a dark side. A 19-year-old stalker named John Brando. Brando initially wrote fans' letters, most insidious, but soon turned ominous. Authorities said at the time, sent an eerie letter. I have an obsession with an unobtainable and I don't know, that's not spelled right. I don't know what he's trying to write that I can't attain. It's his writing, everybody. But basically sent it to his sister, and it was about this actor, Rebecca. Schaefer was coming home. Oh, I've actually heard a little bit more. This just reminded me of something, everybody. Schaefer was coming home one evening in 1989, waiting for a delivery. I've heard about this. For the script of The Godfather Part 3. She was getting the script. That's funny. When the doorbell rang, she opened, and that's when Brando shot her to death. Throughout his trial, he sat motionless. And then until the defense played U2's Exit, suddenly the killer rocked in a chair, rubbed his hand on his leg, and smiling, and mouthed the word lyrics, pistol weighing heavy. As Bono discussed in U2 by U2, the song was inspired by Truman Capote's masterpiece In Cold Blood. Brando supposedly interpreted parts of the lyrics as references to himself and Schaefer. So I do know about this guy, and he had been, I watched a documentary about him. That's why it dawned on me. I hadn't thought about it until I read that lyric. He had wrote multiple letters to many different people, and there was something about Rebecca interacted with him, and they told her she would write back, because she's kind of like not super famous, but a little bit famous. It came from kind of like a lower end. She felt the need to correspond with anybody who wrote her, and by interacting with this guy, it pushed him. And they said that's a big no-no when you're a celebrity. Like, maybe send them like a signed card, but don't send them anything that draws the attention that you've noticed them, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I've sent people signed pictures. I've done that.
Tim, don't be sending nobody any letters. I need you on the podcast.
I've sent signed pictures, and I signed my picture, and I put thank you, and I put it in an envelope, and then I stick it in the mail without my address on it.
I mean, that's fair. I wouldn't give them your address. Plus, they might come steal your recycling bin. You never know.
I currently still have the recycling bin. The one that I assumed was mine is outside. I've been using it, and thus far, I still have it.
And Tim is reducing, reusing, and recycling.
There we are, see?
Though we know that modern day recycling doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and there's a whole thing behind that.
Exactly. I think you find something like 62% of all recyclable material ends up in landfill or something. Anyhow.
This episode just keeps getting more depressing. I'm talking about crimes. Tim's talking about how the world's going to implode because we're not recycling. We're just really rocking it in here, Tim. All right. How much time do we have? Do we have time for one more, or you think we're good?
We can probably sneak another quick one in, Joy, before we wrap this up.
All right. I will add one more thing. And this is, I don't want to do that one. Judas Priest. Tim has heard of them.
Yes.
Maybe. So, on a dark December day in Sparks, Nevada in 1985, two young men had been listening to Judas Priest. I had a party apparently dedicated to them. 20-year-old James Vance and 18-year-old Raymond Butnick spent several hours drinking, smoking, and listening to the 1978 Stains Class album. The young men went to a local playground of a nearby church and then shot themselves at point blank with a shotgun. Both were killed. So Butnick was killed instantly. Vance was hideously maimed but survived. Surprisingly, suicide is prosecuted in some states as a rarely used old relic of 13th century common law. Blah blah. It doesn't matter. We don't need to know about that. And so anyway, back to the whole song. Basically, they debated the suicide statutes, but the victims' families felt Judas Priest was to blame for the deaths and took the band to civil court. They alleged the band's song, Better by You, Better Than Me, had hidden subliminal messages like Tim was talking about. Mm-hmm. With phrases like, let's be dead and do it. The family sought millions in damages. And this was in that height of that thing where play the song backwards, you get different things. You know, Judas Priest was one of those bands. Mm-hmm. The case went to a no jury trial. Frontman Rob Hartford even sang the song a cappella from the witness stand to prove the odd sounds heard on the record played in reverse were just the singer's signature, sounds, you know. Mm-hmm. The judge in the case ultimately ruled the band was not responsible. So there you go, Tim. There is one of the cases where during the height of the satanic panic, they called it, Judas Priest, apparently they had just happened to be having a party and they were listening to the music, and then the parents took Judas Priest to court.
Yeah, I remember this being in the news, and it was the whole thing with backwards masking, where bands were supposedly putting these messages in, and if you play Led Zeppelin backwards, it says this thing, and if you play Judas Priest, and if you play Maiden, and all this stuff has the things in backwards. I think it is in the Tenacious D album. I think there's bits in that backwards, and when you play it, it's like it's fun to go to church and things like that.
Exactly. So this one I wanted to give because Tim talked a little about this. So for the early 1990s, for my true crime fans like me who are slightly darker, there's a thing called the Satanic Panic, and there was a big push about like songs that are dark and video games that are dark and pushing you into Satanism and all this stuff, and it proves, and none of it's true, but it would be really hard, like you're saying, if you were Rob Hartford, you were a member of Judas Priest and have to go through this court case over a song you wrote that had nothing to do with these two people. That'd be terrible.
Well, yeah, not only would you have to go through this case and be involved in this thing that's going to tie up your time and going to bring a lot of negative attention to your band. In addition, it's going to cost you millions of dollars in legal fees.
Yep. So I will say I skipped past it because I wanted to get to the Judas Priest part to save time. But the reason they were talking about old laws and stuff was because Vance, the guy that was hideously maimed, lived. They tried to charge him with something called assisted suicide, but it's not a common thing anymore. I mean, he's already been maimed. He lost a friend. Why bring that into it too, right, Tim?
Exactly.
But that's what started all of this. His family, as a way to kind of counteract that, brought Judas Priest into it. But I mean, I've listened to many different bands one hanging out with friends, and I don't know that I would ever bring them into my crime spree.
I know, but I said I think a lot of this stuff is that people are in a dark place, people are in a bad place, and they really should be getting some kind of help for this. And I don't know, maybe these things are just a scapegoat. I don't know.
Well, this was a little bit darker of our Halloween episode, but with that being said, if you or anyone you know is having thoughts of suicide or anything dangerous, please reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It is 1-800-237-TALK. Me and Tim would love for you to do that because that's important.
Absolutely, 100%.
Do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Timothy?
Just what Joy said, and please be kind to each other.
Yes. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
To remind me of another day to